This week, we mark the one-year anniversary of the most heinous attack against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. On October 7th, 2023, the Muslim Brotherhood Hamas terrorists invaded Israel on a Jewish holy day and slaughtered beyond words innocent civilians, including young women, mothers, babies, and men, raping and mutilating women, burning babies in front of their parents, and other acts of savagery that even Hollywood could never dream of. In addition, Hamas kidnapped over 250 civilians, including babies like Kfir Bibas, murdering and torturing many of them. As Jews, we thought that never again would mean that Western civilization would demand immediate release of the hostages and retribution against the murderers. As Jews, we thought the world would stand up for what is right against those who represent evil. What we saw instead, aside from some cheap lip service, was good is bad and evil is good, or at least understandable. Arabs and Marxists took over our universities, threatening and harassing Jewish students, while university leaders couldn't tell us the difference between free speech and calls for the destruction of Israel. Instead of standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel, we saw and continue to see U.S. politicians and policymakers waver between standing for our values and not wanting to alienate the voters who support the destruction of Israel and the United States. At the Democratic Convention, Jewish college students were denied a platform to talk about campus anti-Semitism, while President Biden said of the Hamas protesters, they have a point. On the campaign trail, Democrat presidential candidate Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz seem hell-bent on painting a nice brush over who and what Palestinianism represents. Today's guest is one of the most sought-out experts who is a regular on Fox News, and when he's not on Fox, he's on Newsmax and other cable outlets. Shahar Azani is a veteran Israeli diplomat and pro-Israel activist, and former spokesperson for Israel's consulate in New York. Shahar, thank you for joining Alan Skorsky Reports.
Pleasure to join you, Alan.
Now, there are 1,000 questions I could ask reviewing the last year, but instead I want to start a different conversation. Usually, when there is a tragedy of this magnitude, one of the first questions asked after the dust settles is, what can we learn from this? So what I have learned is a few things. Evil indeed can win. Western civilization with its moral compass no longer exists. World leaders are intellectually lazy and put political expediency over morality. And if the Jews cannot see the writing on the wall now, they never will. And one last thing I just want to read you, because I saw this today from memory. This was at a rally in Brooklyn, New York yesterday. This event was sponsored by Mama's Silent March, marking the first anniversary of October 7th. And according to memory, and they have a video of this, a young girl shouted, F Israel, saying the word F, and was received with applause from the crowd. A young boy said that Hamas should build more tunnels in order to invade and attack Israel. And another woman chanted, we are returning to Acre and Tiberias. On and on. Anyhow, this is all from memory. So Shahar, I'm going to let you have the floor and let you respond, and we can just have a conversation about this.
Well, I love having a sincere, open conversation with you and with all of our viewers and listeners. And I'll first say this: I gotta beg to differ with you on one important point here, Alan.
Good.
Evil can win. I do not believe that evil will win. I will not allow evil to win. I think you won't either. I think that every decent and justice-loving person on this earth, and I still believe that this is a strong and too silent a majority, will stand up to the ignorant, malicious, evil minority from the like that you just mentioned. I think that there is a lot that we have to learn since October 7th. And to me, it's been first and foremost the lesson that we Israelis refuse to believe. And that is, believe them when they tell you who they are. Just like those people at the parlor meeting you mentioned in New York, just like our enemies that repeatedly have told us who they were. They had TV shows telling us who they are. They had their media telling us who they are. They had their very well documented videoed rallies in which they told us who they are and exactly what they were willing to do. And we refused to believe in. We hung on to our, what we call in Israeli, modern Israeli Hebrew, conceptia, our misconceptions of what is. We decided that we're going to read for ourselves what the future is going to be based on our wishful thinking. And it takes me back ages ago to the famous speech made by the infamous criminal Yasser Arafat in the mosque in Johannesburg in 1994, after the signing of the Declaration of Principles and the first part of the Oslo Accords, in which he said,
Yeah.
this is the Hudaybiyah contract. We're just doing this, referring to a contract signed by so-called Prophet Muhammad with the Jewish tribe of Quraysh, with a truce for 10 years. After 2 years, when he had enough, amassed enough believers and power, the Jews were run over, slaughtered, butchered. The men were killed. The children sold for slavery. I mean, this is nothing new. So if we are to move and shift gears, we have to start believing our enemies. And there are, by the way, long-term, immediate consequences to that notion. Because if we are to believe our enemies, then we have to, and we can delve into this, but look into the evil Islamic Republic regime. And we also know that what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. And what starts with the Jewish state never ends with the Jewish state. So beware. Israel is merely the front line of US and Western civilization. It's a beacon of democracy in a very dark region. And the animosity that these people hold towards Israel is exactly like you stated, Alan, the same anti US animosity that they harbor against the United States of America. And they wouldn't even hesitate, not even for 1 second. This is why it makes me laugh when I see, like yesterday, I saw this image of a girl on the campus of UCLA. There were like thousands of Israeli flags on the ground, and she came to tear these flags out, a student on campus, and her shirt said, Queers for Palestine. And it makes me, ask myself, who are these people?
Right.
Where do they get their education? If this is campus college education in the US, then you have a lot to worry about that goes far beyond Israel, the Jewish people, or anti-Semitism. Don't you think, Alan?
Yeah. So here's the funny thing. A, I agree with everything you said. Two, I knew that you would challenge me when I said that evil can win. I threw that out there just to bait you. Okay. So here's the thing. Evil is winning for the moment. They've been winning for the last year. And I know that I threw out Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I wasn't trying to make this political, but that's the season that we are in now, because I see that the Jewish people are being sold out for political expediency. You see it in London with the new prime minister there, and the new foreign minister is David Lammy. You have in France now Macron. Okay, come now the new Vichy government of France. Macron,
Yeah.
democracy, ally of Israel, wants to stop sending arms. So again, it's political laziness, and it's not like they don't know, because their countries themselves are being turned over, being run by these and again, I call them Palestinianists, because I want to be clear that, and this is something that we've done wrong ourselves, because for decades we've referred to Palestinians, and there is more and more now. People are just saying it. There is no such thing. They came from other countries before 1948. We'll
Right.
have that conversation later.
It's like pro-Palestinian, right? When you
Yeah.
think about pro-Palestinian, and there is nothing pro-Palestinian as such about Hamas. When you
Right.
look at Gaza at the moment, there is nothing pro-Palestinian about what happened. And you know what? When you look at the last year, Alan, ask yourself for a minute. Forget about David Lammy or the cookie president. Think about Israel on the ground. Think about hope. Think about strength. Think about it. A year later, nobody expected Israel to be engaged in a war for a year. And nobody expected Israel to fight the Iranian octopus of evil, the Islamic Republic's octopus of evil in such a way. Look at Hamas now in Gaza. At their best, they were able to launch 4 or 5 miserable rockets at Israel, remnants of what they harbored for 18 years. Israel's operations in Lebanon, and you're right, Israel is not just a beacon of democracy in the region. Israel is the liberator of the region. Israel is the one that's allowing the people in Gaza, if there are any innocents there or people who did not support the massacre, to be relieved of Hamas. It's allowing Lebanon maybe the hopes of being a free country. And to see the betrayal of the West, the betrayal of the French president and others in those peoples. It's not just Israel, it's in those people. It's in the aspirations of young Iranians who want a better life for themselves, just like the US back was turned on them in 2009. Are we seeing it again now when we have an opportunity to bring down this axis of evil? So there is the Prime Minister Netanyahu said something that really resonated with me in reference to the cookie President Macron. The macaroon in my eyes. And he told him, he said, we will win with or without you. And we will. Simply because, like Golda said, we have no other choice. But your shame will echo forever.
Correct. And so here's the other issue now, and this is what keeps coming up. And again, you see it on the campaign trail. You've Donald Trump with his moral clarity. Get the job done. Do whatever you have to with Iran. He's telling Israel, you go whatever you have to do. On the other side, and again, I'm not making this Republican versus Democrat, but this is the country is half Republican, half Democrat, or some combination thereof, where there is talk about 2 states. And this is something that has never been asked before.
No, that's my favorite part. The 2-state delusion is by far my favorite part of the what on October 7th did you not understand? I mean, they had a state of their own. They got that state when Israel evacuated thousands of people from Gaza, including digging up the dead from their graves in terrible, terrible pain within Israeli society. I remember those images like it was yesterday. You got a chance to take a piece of land, a prime piece of land, with access to the Mediterranean coast and make it into a beautiful place. What did you choose to do with it? Now, the same lesson that we have for our children when we demand responsibility and accountability and consequences to your deeds needs to be exactly the same from the inhabitants of the Gaza Strip. You got a chance to make something out of it. You took the last 18 years and made that out of it. Now you're going to have to pay the price. We shouldn't reward them for doing what they're doing in an idea of a state. Now, if anybody thinks, and that's also another level, that Israel hasn't changed as a result, that there is an Israeli out there who's going to say, you know what? Looking at October 7th, I think they should have a state. Why don't we give them a state? Why don't we give them a state closer to our border? Because they definitely earned it. Well, they're missing the big trend. And in my opinion, here is the trend. For the past 30 years, we were all under the Oslo mindset. We were working within the framework of the Oslo mindset. The 2-state solution will deal with a terrorist organization, will do this, will do that. Well, when the terrorist attack happened, we have to strengthen those forces because that's our end game. On October 7th, Alan, everything changed for Israelis. The Oslo mindset is done. Hamas shot the Oslo agreements in the head and executed them, along with the babies the Jewish babies they put in the ovens, and the young children they raped and decapitated. So the truth is that we are on a completely different course at the moment, and anybody who doesn't see it is missing the trajectory of Israeli society. And it may take decades, years before anything changes. And what needs to be done before anybody speaks about settlements or Jerusalem or any of the other old topics, it needs to be the same de-radicalization that we've seen in Japan and Germany post-Second World War. There needs to be a re-education of Palestinian Arab society, of all of those inhabitants in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza. And only when the day comes, when they stop believing in this notion, this hallucinatory notion that Jews are ever to disappear from Judea, because we will not, then maybe we'll be able to progress in any direction. But right now, to talk about the two-state solution is to be completely disconnected from reality on the ground and to negate the basic lesson that we talked about, Alan. Believe them when they tell you who they are. And when you have public polls showing 70% of Palestinians in support of what happened,
Correct.
when you have people in Brooklyn supporting what happened, then you're definitely not at the point when you can come to us Israelis and let's talk now about the Palestinian state, with all due respect.
Okay, so you brought up Oslo, and we are where we are now because of Oslo. And why? Because before 1993, there was no Palestinian Authority. It was the PLO, and the PLO was recognized as a terrorist organization. 1993, Oslo gave legitimacy to Palestinianism. So every college student on campus today, they don't know what a PLO is. They know the legitimate aspirations of Palestinianism. That's what Oslo brought us to today. And so you have on the college campuses, you have the university deans, you have, again, in Congress.
No, but wait, Alan, it's important to make that distinction. You're talking about the aspirations, the legitimate aspirations of the
I'm saying that
so-called
in
Palestinians.
quotes. I'm saying that in air quotes.
In quotes. No, but I just want to say, even under the Oslo Accords, they talk about the Jewish state. What's being spoken about on college campuses now is nowhere near that. It talks now, once they smell Jewish blood in the air after 10/7, it's legitimate for them to speak about the eradication of Israel,
But
the annihilation of the Jewish state, not even a Jewish state within the borders of the Oslo Accord. So it's far worse than just talking about the misnotion of the Oslo Accords.
Because Oslo legitimized Palestinianism. And now today, they can say that Israel violated Oslo because Israel is continuing. And again, the propaganda machine is brilliant. Genocide, ethnic cleansing, apartheid. 3 words that have nothing to do with Israel or the Jewish people, but they've been adopted because the Arab propagandists have learned over the years how to manipulate. So,
well, it's not just about words, Alan. It's about money that was funneled on college campuses. I mean, there were significant funds that actually bought so many of U.S. campuses that present a real challenge for ordinary Americans and the future of this country in general. Again, with a level of ignorance, regardless of Israel or the Jewish people, because what's the direction that this country is going in? And when you talk about Oslo, to me, it's that naive memory as a young Israeli watching TV and thinking, hey, the days of the Messiah are here, and then waking up to a horrid reality where buses are exploding on the streets. And I still remember the days when Israeli media didn't know how to cope with those situations. So you'd see on the cover page of the newspaper the image of Ovadia, the bus driver, bus number 5, who drove into Tel Aviv on Dizengoff Street, and the bus exploded with dozens of people. We grew up under the shadow of the Oslo Accords, looking for names of people who died in those attacks. And, I got to tell you that one of the mechanisms that we have is we go through those names. We try to learn about them. We try to give them that sense of memory so that we owe it to them as my fellow Israelis who perished in those attacks. And then come October 7th, and in one day, Alan, you have 1,200 names. And even now with soldiers passing, and you can't do it in one bit. So I developed a custom of my coping. And then every day I look into the story of a person or a family who was butchered on that day, just to keep that memory alive within us. Because what you and I are doing now, and what so many other decent people are doing, is what we owe to the memory of these people, is to make sure that never again is really never again, and that we wake up to the new reality and we try to awaken the conscience of the so-called free world. And as much as we can be successful or not will not determine our success in battle, because we will win this. We are the state of Israel. We are a people, a lions of a people. What I carry with me from the last year, beyond the memory of pain, and we know Rosh Hashanah is a time of remembrance, Yom Kippur. We think about the Almighty remembering us, and for us to remember the Almighty. But the memory that we carry with us is, yes, the memory of the pain, the memory of the Evan family from Be'eri, the father, the mother, and the four teenage boys who were hiding in a bush for 6 hours, like an eternity, Alan. And then at some point, one of the savages finds them and shoots into the shrubbery, killing the mother and the father and the two older teenage boys with the two younger boys underneath them. Can you imagine that reality? But for me, it's also carrying the memory of the late Ben Shimoni, age 31, who was at the Nova Festival, who drove people out to Beersheba. He was already safe,
Yeah.
and then choose to drive back,
Yeah.
pick some more people up, go back, and then go again. And in the third time, gets an RPG shot at the car, and then he dies along with everybody else in the car. His life taken by these savages. For me, it's the memory of Ben Zusman, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory, who died in December in battle, in December of 2023. And in his letter to his family, he says, I dreamt of this moment, of being that guardian on the walls of Jerusalem. Alan, who can defeat a people like that? Who can defeat? In what reality is the state of Israel defeated when this is the DNA of our people? When you think of those college kids in the US marching stupidly in support of massacre, the screenagers, and you look at those Israeli teens who are joining the military and not just avoiding battle, running to the front line to defend, just like the Ethiopian Israeli soldier who was mentioned in the prime minister's speech in Congress, who was running for miles and miles barefoot to fight those savages. That's who we are. That's why I'm telling you, they're not winning. They didn't win, and they will never win, in spite of our mistakes. And on that morning, when I looked up on the morning of October 7th, and I was thinking, what's going to happen? I looked to the north to see whether the savages of Hezbollah would attack at the same time. And when they didn't, I knew that the Almighty is giving us another chance.
Yeah. So, Shahar, we have a few minutes left. I went to an event last night in Long Island. Our Nassau County Executive, Bruce Blakeman, is a real hero.
He is.
And he created, and there was this very big event. We had members of Congress from both sides of the aisle. We had a number of speakers. We had some lone soldiers who spoke. There was a girl, her first name was Sheer. She was a Nova survivor. And she spoke about the boy, and I couldn't get his name, but who rescued her and then went back for other people. And I'm just wondering if
that's Ben.
Yeah.
Ben
who it was. There are many amazing stories, and there's no question that God is watching over us.
And I want people to hear them. You know, when you and I are speaking and we see all of those images of hatred, people need to know the DNA of this people and the backbone of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. It's unbreakable, no matter how much I look at this, and if for a whole year Israel has been fighting this war, for a whole year, in spite of them marching on the streets, in spite of them doing what they're doing, in spite of the squad, in spite of the stupidity and the idiocy, then that tells you something about the meaning of resilience.
Let me ask you one last question. I know that you're a diplomat.
And time flies so quickly, Alan. It can't be last question. We just started.
You and I could talk for an hour about this. There are a number, and again, this is not political for me. I said before, when it comes to support for Israel and combating anti-Semitism, I, as a Republican, will stand with Richie Torres and John Fetterman, as I would with Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz.
Aren't they amazing, though? I mean, think about John Fetterman for a minute, who comes from the belly of the beast, right?
Yes.
He was celebrated by these people, and as soon as he shows his decent moral colors, they abandon him. Shame on them.
See, he was great, because I'll tell you, I was one of the guys during the campaign, I was trashing him. He was endorsed by Bernie Sanders and AOC and J Street.
Talk about another disgusting person, you know, Bernie Sanders, who's fighting in the Senate to make sure that Israel doesn't get the armaments it needs to fight evil. Shame on him. Shame on him.
I distinguish between him and a guy like Chuck Schumer. To me, Bernie Sanders is a stain on humanity. Chuck Schumer is a stain on the Jewish people. Because here's the person, see, Sanders never pretended to be anything different than who he is. But Chuck Schumer and Gerald Nadler and Jamie Raskin, others like them, especially Schumer, he was the shomer. Now, I call him the sheker, the liar and the fraud. Because what he did was give cover to J Street and every anti-Israel Democrat with his speech. So I know that I'm sure that you were just as exercised as I was about it. And again, I don't know in your capacity as a former
I
diplomat
mean,
if
and the interference, the
yeah,
interference in calling Israel to replace its leadership
yeah,
leads me to another important, very important point, and also relates to what was just published in Bob Woodward's book about President Biden ill-speaking about Prime Minister Netanyahu.
yeah,
And all I'm saying is this: you don't have to love Netanyahu, you don't have to hate Netanyahu,
yeah,
but if people think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is the problem, that
correct.
he is being too tough or too stern or too hawkish, they don't know where the people of Israel are. The
Yeah,
people of Israel are upset with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but not for the reasons they think. They're
right.
upset because humanitarian aid is still going in uninterrupted into
To Gaza.
Hamas's
Yeah,
hands in Gaza.
yeah,
Hamas's hands, not just going into Gaza, into Hamas's hands, while our poor hostages are rotting and withering away in the tunnels of that city of evil. That's why we're upset with the prime minister. And any future leader of the state of Israel is not going to be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I assure them. And I
right.
just want to mention, because really we have a minute left, I
Right.
just want to remind this little one,
Fear
just for
Bibas.
everybody who's listening. Kfir Bibas, who was kidnapped from his bed at the age of 9 months with his mother and his 4-year-old brother and his father. And if you can look at this face and call this baby a colonialist aggressor, and you can march down the street in Manhattan, Chicago, or anywhere else and not call for the release of this baby, then you have lost your right to be called a human being. And
Correct.
that's shame on you. Just like when Rashida Tlaib was chased by Fox News at the time,
Yeah,
and she was asked to denounce the decapitation of babies, and she couldn't do it, and
yeah,
that showed us who she is. Then that is your test, because that's what 10-7 gave us, the ability to discern good from bad, right from wrong, human and inhumane. And
yeah.
that's shame on anybody. And let's hope that this angel goes back home as quickly as possible. Really, I pray that at the opening of this Jewish year, we will see him and all of our hostages back home, and those who perished will come for proper burial in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, Alan. And I'm sure you and all of our viewers and listeners share the same hope.
Shahar, I thank you so much. I know that you're very busy, so I'm wishing you
Thank you.
Shana Tova, a year filled
Shana
with
Tova.
bracha. May God Hashem have rachamim on the Jewish people and
Amen.
awaken us from the stupor that we're in, because many of us still don't see the writing on the wall.
And may
Shachar,
we see a change, a good change coming, and a safe and secure and strong and changed Israel. Thank you, Alan. Gmar Chatima Tova to you and to everyone.
all the best. Honor to have you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Bye.